And we have a man from the election integrity force here with us today. Braden Giacobazzi. How is that? Braden, come on up here. Now, Braden did something that always scares me. He brought me a thumb drive with a PowerPoint on it, so I'm going to see if I can...
I stole all your data.
I got it to work.
Oh, can you go back? But yeah, that's it. There we go.
Okay, here's the arrows, and you can control it. Everybody, Braden. All right.
Hi, everyone. My name is Braden Giacobazzi. I'm with the Election Integrity Force, and I am here to tell you that 2020 was the most secure election ever. No, but seriously, I'm kidding. Matt, I cannot see the presentation on the screen. Do I have to look over here all the time? All right, we can do that. Do I have to look over here the whole time?
Yeah, for some reason, but
okay.
You can do that or take the microphone. But yeah, lean over and see it. There you go.
Okay, so I'm with the Election Integrity Force, and what we've been doing is canvassing around neighborhoods and looking at votes. I've been working with my man here, Tim Vetter. He is our data lead, and I'm working with him and Brendan Muir as part of the leadership team in the Oakland County Division of the Election Integrity Force. We also have a few hundred volunteers around the state that are doing what we are doing. It's very important work that we're doing, and none of us are being paid. We are a non-affiliated 501c3, I think. So the reason I got involved in this, I was not involved in politics. The reason that I got involved was because I was at the TCF Center along with Jose and many other people at the 2020 election, and what I saw there gutted me, and I can't believe that elections are run that way, and it was very clear to me that something fraudulent was going on, right? And I wanted to see if that was true or not, if that was just a hunch based on the fact that I got kicked out of there for doing my job. So I met a lady named Jackie Eubanks, who's running for office now, and we canvassed around in Macomb County. We knocked on doors, and we were comparing what the voter file said to what the people actually said about their own voter file. And we found a 17.6% anomaly rate between what the voters were saying and what the voter file was saying about those voters. And so from there, I started looking at Oakland County because I didn't know that anybody was working in Oakland County. So I started analyzing data, purchasing voter files, and doing the work myself. And at that point, I ran into a lady named Sandy Kiesel, who is the head of the EIF, and she put me in charge, or she put me on the team with Tim and Brendan on this leadership team in Oakland County, and it was very nascent at the time. And it turned out that they had data analysts like Tim who have been doing this for decades. And so the work that I was doing by hand and figuring it out and making it work, because I'm an engineer and I love data, right? He could do in 5 minutes. And so they taught me a lot about how to do this, and so I've been analyzing data with Tim, and he's been working all over the state, and so that's what we're doing. And so here we go. So today we're going to go over voters that are registered at illegal addresses, voters who moved or are digitally non-existent, duplicate voters, dead voters, statistical improbabilities, and official evidence of tampering, which will get very interesting. So I hope that you will continue to pay attention near the end, because it gets very interesting. And you'll see things that maybe you weren't even expecting. So first, let's talk about what a legal address is, so you know what an illegal address is. The legal address that you vote from must be the place that you reside in, and you must have resided there for at least 30 days prior to an election. This is supposed to be verified by the Secretary of State and clerk, but as you will see, there may be an issue with that. We don't know. What's also important to note here is that it's not necessarily your mailing address. Your mailing address could be a post office box. It could be you could have a second home, a summer home, right? But you have to live at the address that you vote from. And that's going to come into play in a second here. So, is there fraud in Oakland County? According to the officials, this is the most secure election possible. But when we looked at the qualified voter file that's officially put out by our Michigan Secretary of State, we found 4,600 voters who were digitally confirmed to live at illegal addresses such as USPS stores, vacant lots, and UPS stores. right? And of those 4,600 voters, what we found digitally was that 2,175 of them supposedly voted in 2020. There are 82 other counties. Just to put that in perspective. What you're looking at there on the right side of that is a map in Google that we made with just a few of those pins placed on the map, because we can't even put enough pins on a map because Google won't allow it. There's too many of them. So here's an example. This is a vacant building that used to be a nursing home. If you didn't know, the nursing homes are notorious for fraud because it's easy to exploit the elderly, and so they do. There are 17 people still registered at this vacant building. Why can we find this, which is very simple to do if you have the files, but the Secretary of State can't? So here we go into moved or non-existent voters 1. There's a section 2, and that's the only reason that that's there. What we did here was take the official qualified voter file for Michigan, which has your name, your address, and your voting history, so it shows which elections you voted in and which ones you didn't. It doesn't say who you voted for, because that would be illegal, but it shows you which elections you voted in. And we took that file and compared it to a private database called Melissa. Melissa is not a person, it's a database, and it's a preeminent database with many certifications and awards. Corporations, businesses use it to make sure that they're finding the right people and the right demographics. It's well known and well respected. But that wasn't enough, because we know that all databases are flawed, so then we checked that against another private database called True People Search, which any of you guys can go to for free, and you can look up the habitation history of basically anyone. You can see where they live, their phone numbers. It's kind of creepy, but whatever, right? We can use this for the data. So we didn't just trust one file, we checked 3 files against each other to come up with these data to make sure that we had very conservative estimates. And what we found was that there was at least 1,715 what we're calling phantom voters digitally confirmed to not exist or have moved out of the county before the legal registration date of 10/1/2020. And this doesn't even account the people that moved within the county, which would raise the number up much higher. And the reason we don't include that is because we want a conservative estimate, and we want to keep it simple, and we want it to only count the most extreme cases. So that number may be much higher. You can see them on the right there, just a few of them. Move voters too. So this is very similar to what we were just looking at, except instead of comparing it to True People Search, we decided to say, okay, what if True People Search isn't the best? Let's look at the National Change of Address Database. The National Change of Address Database is what is upkept by the United States Postal Service itself. And so people use this to make sure that they find the right addresses for marketing or for whatever reason, right? And it's considered a very trustworthy source. Of course, it's not perfect, but no source will be perfect. So we wanted to check 3 databases against each other, and here's what we found. At least 3,569 what we're calling phantom voters were digitally confirmed to have moved out of the county or out of the state by the 1st of October 2020 and not living at their alleged address in Oakland County so far. And this, once again, does not even include the people who did move within the county, because that would get too complicated, and we only wanted the simplest, most extreme cases. So here's an example. This is one that I knocked on the door of this house myself, so I can verify that this is true. There's a 3-bedroom house. 18 people are registered at this single house, and nobody finds this suspicious. 16 of those 18 people are considered overseas civilians, yet when Tim looked this up in the system for me, lo and behold, they have no foreign address. How in the hell does this exist in our voter file? And why am I finding this? Why are we finding this? But our Secretary of State seems to think it doesn't exist. It wasn't that hard. Duplicate voters. This one's really simple. I think you'll all understand it. We found 2,803 duplicate registrations within our qualified voter file, just within Oakland County. Dead voters. I think we all understand this. This is all preliminary data, so before I unveil it, I just want to make sure that we say that. We haven't knocked on the doors yet to confirm these yet. But what we found preliminarily is that there are likely 156 dead voters digitally confirmed to be registered within Oakland County to vote. Imagine what we'd find in the other counties. We've heard similar numbers possibly in other counties as well. Statistical improbabilities. There are so many, I could talk all night, so I'm just going to highlight one that maybe you haven't heard yet. So what we see here are 2 tables. they list 11 jurisdictions, and in both tables, you can see the same jurisdictions are listed. These are the top 11 jurisdictions with the most potentially fraudulent voting addresses that we discussed earlier in these earlier slides, and they just happen to be the same 11 jurisdictions where Joe Biden in 2020 soared past Hillary's 2016 votes. What are the odds? Vote history tampering. Now this is very fun, but you got to pay attention because it's kind of complicated and it builds on it. So what we're looking at here, because we are nonpartisan and we feel that this does affect candidates on both sides, right? This is a systemic issue. We're looking at Governor Whitmer's voting history. And I can't really highlight anything right now, but if you look at the top, what you'll see is a snapshot of Governor Whitmer's voting history according to her own Michigan QVF. And it says Gretchen Whitmer, whose party is a Democrat and branch in government, and the method that she voted in 2020 was absentee. But if you see the highlighted squares that are highlighted in yellow, it says that she did not vote in the previous 4 elections. However, when you look at that same qualified voter file in 2022 in April, a year and a half later, the same Gretchen Whitmer, who is a Democrat, who was in the branch of government and voted absentee in 2020, has now suddenly miraculously voted in all 4 previous elections. How is that possible? It's a secure election file, right? How is somebody tampering with that? How is that being moved? And where are the timestamps to show who's moving that, why they've moved it, and what was done, and how many other people were affected by this, right? And if Gretchen Whitmer is not safe from this, what makes you think that you are, right? And in fact, it's not just Gretchen Whitmer. So what we found was that 24% of our entire Michigan legislature has had similar problems and lost voter histories within their file. And it's not just that, right? If you look at the Secretary of State's own website, and Pat will cover this later, I don't want to spoil what he's doing with this, but if you look at the Secretary of State's own website, she says that 5.58 million people officially voted in the 2020 election. However, when you look at the qualified voter file, which would be the only thing that you can use to check that, it says that only 5.48 million people voted, a full 104,000 people less than what she says voted. Now, what's more interesting about this is that the snapshot on 12/1 on December 1st of 2020 says that there's a 104,000 vote discrepancy between what is in the file and what she's officially reporting. But when you check QVF files, subsequent QVF files at the end of December and in April of 2021, somehow more votes have been put into the file, and somehow that gap has been lessened. So we know that in a QVF file, it is a malleable file because people come and go throughout the state and people get removed from the file. So it is possible maybe that that votes would be removed from the system, but how in the heck are votes being added to the system a year later? That doesn't make sense. What is the legal justification for this? The bottom line is that there were more ballots cast, according to the Secretary of State's own official numbers, in 2020 than there were people who voted. And one ballot is supposed to equal one vote. So how is this possible? But it gets more interesting. If you go up to Grand Traverse County, this is no longer Oakland. According to the Secretary of State's own website, about 3,500 people live within Long Lake Township and Mayfield Township. Yet, according to the QVF, a full month after the election occurred, 0 people voted in person in those townships. Now, we all know that there was a COVID fiasco in 2020, but how realistic is it that 0 people went to their precinct and voted in person? And why are these numbers not adjusted? Let's say that maybe somebody didn't fill out the files right. Well, according to the law, the QVF is supposed to be upkept and made accurate within 7 days of an election. And this QVF file, that snapshot that we're looking at, is a full month after the election. How is that possible? And why don't any of these numbers match? And why do they keep changing, right? So this one is very interesting. If you look on this board, you're going to see Secretary of State candidate Christina Caramos voting history. She's running against Jocelyn Benson. So on the left side, you can see that we've taken snapshots of her official voting file, about a dozen of them, going back to 2019 all the way through 2022. And if you look on there, in October of 2019, it says that she voted in all the previous elections. But then magically, in March 1st of 2020, 8 of those previous election histories disappear. That's what those yellow boxes are. And those don't, and they disappear for a year until April 1st of 2021, when they magically reappear. Right? But that's not the end of it, right? If you look out over to the right, you see another set of yellow boxes that shows that now somebody has removed her 2020 election voting history. And then that doesn't reappear until February of 2022. Why do people think that this is a secure system? Where are the timestamps, and who is responsible for changing this, and why don't we know who this is? And how can a Secretary of State come out and say that she knows what happened and that this is a secure election when things like this are happening? In fact, it's not just Christina Caramos, it's not just Governor Whitmer, it's not just your legislatures. What we found through all these QVF files was fully 4 million of these little nasty yellow boxes of missing, lost voter histories. To put that into perspective, according to the Secretary of State, who has probably cooked the books, or possibly cooked the books as to how many real voters there are based on what we're seeing here, according to her, there are only 8 million people voting that are registered to vote in this country, or in this state. 4 million of these boxes. What that means is that statistically, right, for every 2 voters, you have 1 lost vote. Take that in for a second. Is this enough to sway an election or change something? I think that's pretty big, but you make the decision. So the final slide that we have here, this is complicated, but what you can see are spikes on a graph, right? These, what you're looking at are red and blue lines, if you can see them. I'm sorry, it's a little small, but what you're seeing here are vote spikes in the middle of the night, the day after the election on November 4th. And what you see here is that 15% of all of Macomb's votes showed up in the dead of night, the day after the election. What you see here is that 11.8% of Wayne County's votes showed up in the dead of the night, hours after the election. What you see here is that 18.1% of Kent's votes showed up hours after the election. And in Oakland County, what you see is that 16.6% of the 767,000 alleged 2020 voters appeared sometime in the dead of the night on November 4th. Before 2020, when people looked at elections, when our intelligence agencies would look at elections around the world, if they saw something like this, they would think, maybe we're in a banana republic.
We are.
Why is this not front page news? Now, I know we've probably all seen these spikes, but I think we wanted to put it into context here a little bit as to just how big that was. What can we do? Well, I'm limited on time here, and I think Pat's going to cover this because he knows how to fix stuff. So I'm going to skip this slide, and Pat's a rock star. So you should listen to what this man says. He has been in the thick of this. He has a book out, and he can explain this backwards and forwards. I hope we're explaining a couple of things that he doesn't know yet, right, about Michigan, but maybe he does. I don't know. I'd love to take questions. I don't know if we have time. Do we have time or not?
We're going to do it after we're up.
All right, so please find us at electionintegrityforce.com. We're looking for volunteers, donations. We're on Telegram as well, but most importantly, please go to electionintegrityforce.com and have a look at our reports and share them with people. We need exposure on this because people are living in a bubble. Well, what I would prefer to be doing, I love presenting to you guys, but I would prefer to be also presenting to people who are in the middle, who have been fed a line of nonsense that there is nothing to question here. I would love to talk to moderates and show them the data and get away from the emotions and show them this and see if we can crack through some of these bubbles. I would love to talk to Democrats. I'd love to talk to anybody, right? So please get these reports out and come see Tim and I because we can talk about this data backwards and forwards. We've been living it for a year, working behind the scenes. And by the way, there's a lot of people working behind the scenes that you'll never see because they don't don't want their names out there. They don't want to, I mean, it's risky to come out and talk about this stuff, but there are hundreds of us behind the scenes working on this. We need your help. We don't have funding from basically anybody, and we're just doing this because it's the right thing to do. So please share our reports. I appreciate your time. Thank you very much, and get Pat up here.
Braden Giacobazzi with the Election Integrity Force.